Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. My name is Catana Malinowski, and I am the host of Transformational Art with Catana, making the unmanageable manageable. Welcome. Today, here on Transformational Art with Catana, I'm your host, Catana Malinowski, and I'm here with Samantha Louise, and we are about to have a conversation about communication and transforming and women and just so many different layers of healing that we both bring and how we intersect in what we do. And hopefully this conversation will resonate with the listeners and you'll reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to have a conversation further. But right now, this is an authentic and unfiltered conversation that we hope you enjoy.
Yes, thank you, Catana. This is so refreshing to be able to speak freely like this, to be able to speak with another woman who has some shared lived experiences, some shared perspectives. And I think as we've gotten to know each other the last few months, it hasn't been direct connection to one another,
Right.
but like that indirect observation, seeing what are we up to, and these intersections that we found with
Yes.
the theme of women's empowerment can be so broad.
Yes.
But the other day I heard you talking and you said, I've heard you a couple of times say that you are a humanitarian.
Yes.
And it seems like a simple identifier to share with the world, but the implications of saying that you're a humanitarian, I think, shifts the quality of the work and the depth of the work that you're willing to do.
Yes.
So as we've just been visiting about statistics, horrifying statistics, unreasonable statistics about women experiencing violence, women being destroyed and shamed and threatened when they step into power. What does all of that mean?
Denied their autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
and men feeling threatened, though we don't want them to. You and I are in that space where we believe that we can do this without having to threaten the autonomy and masculine nature of men that's inherent in who they are. At the same time, we do want to empower women. We do want our autonomy as human beings, and we want that free of fear. And that's really right now, and actually for millennia, that women have been in fear and controlled by fear in all of its different aspects, even when people were successful. The successful women still had fear of not being good enough, not being as good as the man, and there's so many different layers of that. It's just mind boggling. And, before we started recording, we were talking about this poor woman, a millennial woman that was forced out of her Homeland Security job of disinformation because when she stepped into that role and tweeted to the world, hey, look, I got this new awesome job of, watching out for all of you through Twitter to thwart disinformation that, has a potential to create a hotbed that then turns into violence, was forced out of her job due to threats and life threats. I'm going to rape you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to murder you. You're a bitch. You're a whore. You're a Jew. And she wasn't Jewish. So, but the slurs, the attacks, it just being a woman in this high powered role. And she wanted to keep going. But unfortunately, the Homeland Security said, well, we're going to pause this because it's taking away right now from what we're focusing on, even though to me, that's BS. Because what happened was that members of Congress in the Republican Party, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and call them out because they all came and said, well, what is she doing in there anyway? You know, and they started attacking her, and they did it on TV shows, and getting into that, women attempting to be in high powered roles, they get attacked. And the article that I read today through the AP was how all of these different women were forced from their roles due to death threats, threats of rape, threats of bodily harm, not only to themselves, but to their families. And all because women want the autonomy to be humans that succeed equally to their male counterparts. That's bullshit.
Yeah. I also appreciate very much, before we started recording, you made reference to something I like to talk about a lot, which is the whole idea of women eat their own, right? So we are not man haters. We love men that are willing to support and empower women and do
Yes.
their own inner work to figure out what the heck that means. And then there's the other element of, what is it like to be a woman and grow within yourself and step into power or leadership and find that other women don't want to support you with that whole mindset of, I fought my way to the top. Now you can do it too. I found my way to this seat at this table. You can go find your way too. And sometimes not even just that disregard, but the actual sabotage, the actual comments, the evaluations that are more strict, more critical, the leadership and management that is unfair, unequal. It's
Well,
everywhere. It's like women are facing it from who should be their own community and supporters as much as they are from men that are unaware, and a lot of them that are doing it intentionally.
yes. And yes. Yes. And getting into that, you know, the unfortunate byproduct of the struggle that we have to get into high powered positions and be able to keep those positions in that battle. Yes, you can fight your way up, and now you're going to have to battle me as well as the men. And I'm going to give you an even bigger battle because there is no way I want to give up this position. And that it's sad. And we compete in so many different ways. And as an artist, actually, I want to bring this in because it just came to my mind about our conversation. But I have an art piece that I've been working on behind the scenes for years. And it's actually been very difficult because I need some male models that will step into the role of the way that we exploit women. And I actually, you know, that our advertising exploits women to sell their products. And believe it or not, the men don't want to play. They're like, no way are we going to do that. Oh, so it's okay for the women to do that? Well, yeah, but it's not okay for you to do that. Oh, no. Mm-hmm. And I actually lost some friends along the way because I had other artists tell me, oh, just ask the people you know. Well, that was a bad idea because then I lost some friends that were very uncomfortable with what I had just asked them. Think about that. You know, here I was just going to duplicate advertising that's already on TV, in magazines, newspapers, everywhere, billboards.
Normal. It's normal. Normalized.
Oh my
it's
God.
Okay.
That just led me to a whole nother article that I read about a celebrity, a male celebrity that was charged with sexual advances. And they referred to it, well, why should he be charged with something that's normal? And I almost lost my mind. You know, wait a minute. That's not normal. It shouldn't be considered normal to anybody for any reason, you know, just forcing yourself upon a woman because you are who you are. Give me a break, you know. But that whole going into that advertising space, and part of what I was using in my sculptural aspect of it is makeup. So the makeup containers, and this would make up the armature of my sculpture, because these are ways that the patriarchal society brainwashes us, conditions us to show up in the way that they want us to show up, not in the way that may be comfortable. I don't wear makeup. I wear makeup every once in a great while, but it's for my eyelashes so you can actually see them once in a while.
Me too. I love this. I was just going to say that. I think I'm noticing neither of us do that.
And
It's
yet,
unusual and awesome.
and then the business coach I had said, if you don't wear makeup, you're not trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That doesn't make any sense, but okay. So if a little bit of black mascara makes the difference between whether you trust me or not, maybe I've got some beachfront property in Utah to sell you, because I don't think my mascara is going to change the fact that I could be just as corrupt as the next person.
Mm-hmm.
It's absurd.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a man coach, and I'm making no disrespect to him. I think he's a good person, but that's that conditioning.
Yes.
I know that there's been a push to put women back. England just got out of this with, skirts and high heels being a requirement. This girl will never be in that. I've had 7 knee surgeries. I'm not wearing high heels. My orthopedic surgeon would stand up and defend me on that one. And he's the one that told me, your ankles do not support your body, and they don't support your knees. He said if he had it his way, women wouldn't wear high heels unless it was, a thicker bottom that's just wedged.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these different ways that we distort who we are.
Yeah.
To
But
show
look at
up.
what the power of what you just said beyond makeup. Like that's the starting point. Paint on a new face and then don't put your hair in a ponytail unless you took an hour to do a certain cute thing with the ponytail. Don't wear a power suit. You should wear a dress. Don't wear a long skirt, wear a short skirt. Don't wear a this, wear a that. Stand this way, don't stand that way. Use your voice. Well, like everything is about don't be yourself.
Yeah.
Let us tell you and groom you into what we think is a beautiful, elegant, sophisticated, trustworthy, going back to your original comment about that, then you're trustworthy because then you look like a woman in
Yes.
leadership. What?
It really comes back to the vision that men have of
Yeah.
voyeurism toward the female form. And I could go on for hours about this because I spent 7.5 years studying art, and I know the art history. I know the details of where a lot of this comes in. And yeah, I mean, just that whole, you're going to be appealing. It's not trust. If you're going to be here, then we want to be pleasantly pleased by your presence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We don't want to be uncomfortable. We want to be pleased. We don't want to look at you like a man. We want to look at you like a woman,
Yeah.
an object.
This is wow. I'm just thinking about even uh when I was teaching a few years ago, I was a teacher at a middle school, and um there was during like the preschool in-service time in the fall before school started with kids. I learned about this thing that the male teachers did, and it was like imagine fantasy football, but they did this like recruiting of the female teachers. And the essence was who's the most fuckable female teacher?
Wow.
So while we're getting ready for kids to come back to school in the fall, like it feels really gross inside of my body to even, I've never shared this story, but to learn that the men were meeting and ranking how hot the female teachers were while we're like lesson planning and right, creating a healthy environment for kids to come and learn. That's what a bunch of the men were off doing, is who's got the best hair, the nicest tits, the best shaped ass. And that's what the ranking was, the best stomach, the nicest legs.
And to think that's what's influencing
Disgusting.
teens, the tweens that are there in that middle school space.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether we realize it or not, and it kind of goes into the workshop I was telling you I'm going into tomorrow, with moms and grandparents, or, parents and grandparents and educators and mentors of tweens and teens. Communication is everything. And we have nonverbal communication and verbal communication, and
Yeah.
nonverbal communication can scream.
Yes. And kids hear it
Oh boy.
really loud and clear.
I remember how it was for me vividly to this day, and I was thinking about it the other day. I even had a science teacher that once made a comment about my body
Mm-hmm.
in an inappropriate way. And I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, this, and then thinking about what you just said, it's like, well, that makes so much sense,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know what goes on behind the scenes like that. I was a very involved parent with the schools, and I noticed that as my kids got older to the junior high school level, the lower grades, they were like, oh yes, we love having you in the classroom, we love you being here. But as they got older, it was, we don't want you here,
Mm-hmm.
you're a distraction. Well, what's that about? You tell me that you want me to be an involved parent, and then you push me away.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain level of involvement that they want you to have, and that's a whole nother story. But yeah.
Yeah.
And just, and one of the other things that I learned a few months ago through LinkedIn, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember exactly what the source was, but 54 million women left the workforce globally from high positions during the pandemic. 90% of them permanently.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read stories like I did today, that doesn't surprise me.
That gave me the chills because it's really sad. It's not a good thing that we want to hear, but I feel like it's also an indicator of boundaries that women are starting to say, I've always felt this inside of me. I've always felt it's not right. Finally, now that there's a shift happening in the world, I don't care anymore. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to take care of my kids or my partner if it's a partner that's supportive.
Yes. And I'll come back to that, because we spoke about embracing the men that are supportive and the ability to nurture boys into men that embrace being men, but at the same time embrace being compassionate and accepting of the autonomy of the female counterpart. Interestingly enough, those 53 or 54 million women that left those high positions,
Mm-hmm.
they even got into breaking it down. And I want to say this was Harvard Business School that did this, because it makes sense when they were breaking it down. They showed that when women hold upper management positions and CEO positions, the productivity rate goes up 86%. And that was surveyed by both men and women in the workplace that worked under them. Men saw greater compassion and productivity than even the women did, but that probably reflects that competitive nature that we were talking about earlier, that it's like almost a little struggle that constantly takes place because one is in that higher position, and there's that internal struggle that we always have going on due to the patriarchal system dictating to us how to show up. So I think there's always, even when we want to be friendly, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
for a lack of better wording, but friendly to each other, then there's that little bit of pullback inside of you that goes, well, if I'm friendly, then they're going to eat me alive.
Yeah. Or I won't be taken seriously.
Or I
Because
won't.
then it's like we're girls gabbing.
Yeah.
Right? all of a sudden the professionalism
Disappears.
is discredited.
Yes.
Yeah.
The validation. In fact,
Yes.
I would like to read a quick excerpt from Nonviolent Communication that really caught my attention in terms of women. Um, let's see, it had to do with acknowledging needs. Okay, needs. This is where it's at. This really just floored me. It really made me upset, actually. So the pain of expressing our needs versus the pain of not expressing our needs.
Yeah.
In a world where we're often judged harshly for identifying and revealing our needs, doing so can be very frightening. Women, in particular, are susceptible to criticism. For centuries, the image of the loving woman has been associated with sacrifice and the denial of one's own needs to take care of others. Because women are socialized to view the caretaking of others as their highest duty, they often learn to ignore their own needs. At one workshop, we discussed what happens to women who internalize such beliefs. These women, if they are asked what they want, will often do so in a way that both reflects and reinforces the beliefs that they have no genuine right to their needs and that their needs are unimportant.
Boom. That hits so deep. And I guarantee that for so many men that might be listening to this and many women listening,
Yes.
they want to defend and say that's not how it is. And it speaks volumes to the repression and suppression and denial
And
that
I
it's
should say,
painful. It does hurt.
oh boy. And I should say that that's Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life, third edition with Marshall B. Rosenberg, PhD. It, the whole notion of what resonated with me was, again, we're something to be, we're like a robot. We're to be programmed. And if our programming doesn't come out right, hit the reset button. Just that whole notion of we don't deserve our rights. We don't deserve to be heard in that way that we show up, whatever way it is. If a man gets rowdy, oh, well, that's just guys being guys.
Yeah.
If a woman gets rowdy, there's something wrong with her. Psychologically, there's something wrong with her demeanor. I've even, in my past, because I tend to have a more masculine energy.
Me too.
And I
I'm
think,
bigger, I'm stronger, I'm
yes,
taller, I have a deeper voice.
yeah. And when we've learned to defend ourselves in life, with my history and anybody's history where there's been difficulties in surviving,
Mhm.
when we learn survival skills, we tend to show up with more masculine energy. The go-to word is, oh, you're a dyke.
Yep. Mhm.
You can't wear your hair short because if you are, you're trying to be a man. No, I'm not. Maybe
Yep.
it's comfortable. Maybe I like the way that looks on the frame of a face, you know.
Mhm.
It floors me. That as you can tell, that comment really stuck with me because it's the struggle that we also face in terms of pro-choice.
Mhm.
And that just leads me to a whole nother segment. I go through the AP press each morning because I don't watch TV. I don't watch the news because then you get
Yeah.
their perspective, you get
Lens.
their twist, you get their biases, you get their, yeah, you get their lenses. In this way, when I read the news, then it's coming through my filters and my hearing, and I can be pretty neutral in what I'm reading. Just in some of them, I have been very neutral. This is one area where neutrality ends at autonomy. And I watched the world around me, and getting back to the, different things that women are labeled to be, labeled to do, what our role is, what our role isn't, and with children. So I grew up mentally, physically, and sexually abused. And I attempted suicide 9 times before the age of 18. So life as a child was hell, to say the least. And in the United States, child abuse is among the highest. In religion, it is the highest. I started to break down these statistics. I did have to stop at a certain point because I needed to take a breath and go, okay, break, come back to this later. But as a person, I ran for state senator in Nevada before COVID hit. But COVID kind of derailed that, and it's just off the plate for a little bit. But one of my big things was to have a voice for people who, that are disenfranchised, don't really have a strong voice. That was my goal, was to go in and bring humanity to an otherwise very inhumane system that looks at people with facts and figures and numbers and labels, and bring that humanity into it and go, no, we need to look at this and look at this for real. Child abuse is huge. It's 6 in 10 children are hungry every day. We have this, now we have a baby formula shortage from a plant that got tainted, and they're trying to bring it back up. And another side note real fast is that there was an article about how, well, it's not this is a capitalist society, and it's not the role of the company or the government to feed your child if you can't feed them. Too bad. And I'm thinking about this in terms of, abortion. We have the hardest adoption rates. Children after a year are less likely to be adopted than children that are under a year, but we also make it extremely difficult to adopt children in the United States. Sex trafficking, it's mostly children. I mean, I'm looking at this realistically, and when the child is born, it's all of a sudden it's a burden. Why'd you bring it into the world? Why did you do this? Why did you make that decision? Well, maybe because you didn't leave me another option.
And it's a life of persecution.
It is. And that's where I get into the pro-choice. It's more about this autonomous nature. I've had to be in that space. And was it comfortable? No. Did I learn my lesson about being more careful? Yes. It just floors me how it's, save the fetus but kill the child. That's how I look at it. That's what I see in our society. And then it's a chastise, and then it's a chase to make somebody else responsible for that child, even though society said you better bring it in. It's just absurd. We don't have systems in place. There are plenty of people that would love to adopt, but we also
good parents.
We need to make that process a little more realistic. I don't want to say easier, because that's not necessarily the way that I express that, because we still need to be mindful. Okay, do our best, but you never know until a person has a child. You don't know what their interaction with a child is going to be.
Yeah.
That and of course, this all leads into, then girls and boys and what the difference is. And we often don't see what happens with boys, because the men are boys are going to be men. They've got to grow up a certain way. They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to show their emotions. I just saw some stats on the suicide rate of men because they can't come out to their friends or their siblings or their families, because then they're seen as a snowflake. Get over it, man. You're a guy. You're a dude. Suck it up. So there's
and then all the labels of, if you do feel any emotion as a guy,
then you're gay. There's just these labels
Mhm.
that come flying out of people's mouths. And I oftentimes wonder if they really hear what they're saying.
Mhm.
Because
And how it, yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I've had a lot of conversations with people where in a forum, when you're sitting in a room with, a lot of people, and I like to always have people around in a circle so that everybody
Mhm.
feels equal
Yes.
and not backed into a corner. They often say something much different when you give them the space to be themselves
Mhm.
than they do when they're in that dynamic of having to show up for somebody else.
Mhm.
There's a lot of denial of ourselves as beings in who we authentically are in the true authentic way.
Yeah.
This has been coming up a lot in the last month, um, in so many different groups. What is really authentic. I know I stepped out and said something really authentic, and not one person had anything to say about what I said.
Yes. You
If I
have to
put up
have
a
some
little,
courage to do that.
if I put out the little puppy dog with the,
Yeah.
you know, meme, everybody's loving it. But as soon as I said something real and I said, this is really what pisses me off,
Mhm.
boom, everybody disappeared.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, hey, there's an experiment, because if we're our authentic selves, I think some of it is such a reflection, it's that mirror. As I've been learning, what we are triggered by somebody else is often what we're seeing, and it's something that's stuck in us.
Mhm.
That's why we're getting triggered.
Mhm.
And the learning that and growth that comes from being able to accept, okay, so I've got some work to do.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's not easy.
Mhm.
But the best part is that I'm willing to do it. I'm real willing, and I know I'm going to make mistakes, because guess what? I'm human. And
Yeah.
I think we have to learn to accept more mistakes from ourselves,
Mm.
and that will make that space between everybody a little less rigid.
Yeah. I th- I think that this is a really hopeful and positive path to start walking down in our conversation also, because there is so much scary stuff happening in the world, and
Mm.
it can be hard to have hope from one day to the next. So I think that you're talking about getting ready for your workshop, and some of the groups that I'm hosting right now in holding sacred space for people to be real. The whole intention is to revitalize hope and
Yes.
ignite that inspiration, and doing it as both of us are through the across generations,
Yes.
across cultures and backgrounds. I feel like for a while in the last few years, I've been thinking like I'm here to stop the generational cycles of, or whatever ancestral stuff has happened in my own lineage. But as you're talking about children and their parents and then their grandparents, if all of these generations are willing to come together to talk about stuff,
Yes.
then am I really the first one saying, let's stop the cycle? Or has it been going on and it's just, like I'm starting to reflect and wonder on how much our grandmothers might have put up with just because the conditions were so much harsher. And not to discredit the work that we're all doing in
Right.
this generation,
Right.
because life was different, the world was different. So the context of shifting our own family patterns, shifting our own internal patterns. I feel
I just
like you were talking earlier about the pendulum swing.
Yeah.
We're going down the down ups and downs. Has it just gotten bad enough that our generation right now collectively is starting to say, for real, it ends here?
Yeah.
Like there was work done previously, but this is it. It can't get any worse.
I think we're at that point where we see what happens when we don't quite go. It's like starting a job but not quite finishing it.
Mhm.
So the generations before us. In my case, it would be my parents' generation, and yeah, and the generation before that. So those two generations really broke some glass ceilings. Unfortunately, due to different things that were happening in the society at that time, and where as soon as some things started to feel comfortable, like, okay, we made ground, then it was almost like, okay, we don't need to keep pushing forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I also saw and have observed and done the research where they started to control wages. And so there was a period of time where wages got really high. I know because my mother got to benefit from that period of time. And even though it didn't translate and trickle down, but there were people for real that got to benefit from high wages, low inflation, you know, an economy that was doable. And that's how I'll put it. It was comfortable and doable. And we all know what happens when you get into comfort zones. You don't feel like you need to fight. And I feel like that where there was a need, oh, well, we don't need to work on that. That was done. You know, just like the women that burn bras, you know, oh, well, we don't need to do that. It was already done. And I could always see room. I was that person. So I was always getting in lots of trouble because I was always asking the questions they didn't want to hear. I remember asking about the Vietnam War in 7th grade, and I was told to shut up and never ask that question again. And I was getting in trouble for it. Mm-hmm. So I went to the library and looked up microfiche and newspaper articles the old fashioned way, you know, and encyclopedias and things that could give me as much information as possible. I did not know about the Freedom of Information Act, or I probably would have used it. But I was that, you know, intent. The more you told me no, the more I wanted to know. I'm still that way.
Yes.
You tell me no, or that there's a button. I've got relationships with both of those that I've got to work with. And I also talked a lot about science in junior high school and middle school. We called it junior high school then, and you know, I'd ask questions like, well, if we have a water shortage, because I grew up in the Bay Area of California, so that we from as little tiny pea, I can remember people always arguing about water and the shortage of water. So, you know, and I'm 55 now, so it's been going on over 50 years, if not more, you know, that California was always on a shortage of water. Part of it had to do with whether one region had built reservoirs and the other hadn't, and the South takes from the North. And then there's this North-South battle that still exists today. And now there's even apparently another group that now wants to split it into 3 sections. And it's just interesting how that comes up. But I mentioned, okay, so why don't we do desalinization? I mean, these are words that I was popping up with at 12 years old, 12 years of age. And my science teacher went, you know, you need to be quiet because girls don't talk about science. Math, anything that had anything to do with statistics or really thinking, critical thinking, they were like, you're the oddball. What's wrong with you? You need to shut up, sit down, and be quiet. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was not accommodating to that, but you know, that's a whole nother conversation. I was the unruly girl. I was the one that didn't fit into that mold. And actually, I tested out of school in the 8th grade, and that's a whole nother story. But I was thwarted because I was the troublemaker. So, yeah. You know, again, there were 3 people who tested out, and I was one of them, and the other 2 were allowed to leave school. And they were, come to think of it, they were boys. And I was the troublemaker girl. So they withheld that until the state of California got that information. I was eventually allowed to leave at the age of 16 because they retested me, and they were like, there is no reason for you to be here. They can't give you anything that you don't already know. and this has already been done. Why didn't anybody say something? Oh, well, she's, they had all kinds of labels for me, believe me. And I make no apologies for that, because I feel that I showed a lot of people, I scared a lot of people because they were like, oh my God, you're defying authority. How can you do this? And I was like, because this is absurd. If somebody's doing well, why am I being thwarted because I'm a girl? I just really couldn't wrap my head around that one at all. So, but then there was also socioeconomic issues that were involved. And, just, yeah, when you're an unruly girl, you get put in your place, so to speak. But here I am. I have an AA degree in art, a BA degree in art with a minor in journalism, advertising sequence. I have a master's degree in legal studies with an emphasis in constitutional law, 4.0, top 4% of my class, National Honor Society, Golden Key Honor Society, went to law school, was running for state senator, and I was the one that they deemed that I wasn't going to live past 22 and amount to anything.
Yep. It's like you said earlier about the reset button. Like, how many times did someone try to hit the reset button on you? And it's punishment, it's shame, it's abandonment, it's betrayal, it's anything horrible, awful to push you back. And I love how you said, I have a relationship with the buttons, right? Because you pushed my button and I'm not going to comply. I'm not going to reset. I'm going to do the opposite.
And I will also admit that it's also real buttons. I did have to push the button on the elevator once. I was just me and my son, just to see what happens when you push the button. And and funny thing is, my youngest granddaughter has this. I went to meet up with her in the hospital. My daughter needed to go to work, and she needed me to cover her time in the emergency with my granddaughter. She had a fever and they were trying to figure it out. I showed up and she's like, oh, grandma's here, let's go. And I was like, no, you got to stay and you got to wait. And all of a sudden she had energy and she's running around and she spotted the green oxygen button on the wall. And she turned around and looked at me with this grin, this devious little grin, and her finger, while she's watching me, is headed toward the green button. And I had to give her some information that, they might take your temperature in an alternative method. And she was like, never mind, I won't touch the button. But I was like, oh, I see, this is generational. Okay. I wonder how many other people, and I know my grandmother was that way.
Yeah.
She was very much I'm not going to take this, I'm going to speak up. I did get a lot of things from her. She was a very strong woman. Unfortunately, she went through a lot of hell too. And I'm sure it goes even further back.
Yeah. It's really amazing. And it's again, it brings us back to this current moment that you and I are both in, of exploring what it takes to support girls in their own development, what it takes to support boys. When does it start? And I also think about a lot of what you're sharing, a lot of what we both explore in our own professional development is like, in the world right now, there's so much information everywhere. So for kids, when I was in undergrad school, we had a course called information literacy. And in order to graduate as a health educator, we had to be able to develop websites and do online, like just a different kind of research online as if we were children, so that we could help kids start to navigate the internet, right? As the first generation of digital natives, how do we make sense of all the BS that's coming at us from every angle, inundating us 24/7 through all of our senses? So the idea of being literate and deciphering digital information that's constantly hitting us is really amazing to me. And I think sometimes it feels impossible to teach those skills,
Yeah.
but it has to happen. Like those skills have to be developed. And I just keep wondering how early is too early and how late is too late.
Interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that I know is happening is that I know, one, watching my youngest son, who was 9 years younger than my middle child. So there was quite a difference. He was born in 96. My
Yeah.
daughter was born in 87. And he was able to unlock a locked computer without knowing why he knew how to do that at 2. We
Yeah.
were all trying to unlock the computer and we couldn't figure it out. And I'm pretty computer savvy. I even took computer programming. I was like, I turned around and he's playing solitaire, and I'm like, wait a minute, how did you do that? But they find their way because they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's ads on Facebook. I don't know if you've seen them, but even in other spaces, there's uh, computer programming, doing coding,
Mm-hmm.
and they start coding now in kindergarten.
Yeah. And it's natural.
So now the binary language of
Yes.
ones and zeros. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area with the I was born and raised in Mountain View, now the home of Google, but my mother was in the semiconductor industry. So I have a lot of that natural ability that came to me just because I was in that environment, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is part of it. Because I know that, like my granddaughters that as soon as they could pick up a cell phone, knew how to swipe it.
Yeah.
My other granddaughter knew about the buttons. I even have a picture of her. I'm holding her hand because she wants to hit the red button. I'm like, no, don't hit that button. You know, so I keep that picture just as a reminder of the buttons. But it's I think we have a harder time keeping up with them
Mm-hmm. I agree.
than they do us.
Yeah.
And yesterday, another article came out and said that the AI bots are here. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is all part of their natural progression to be able to deal with what's coming up in their future, which is these AI bots. They're saying by 2035, or maybe I got it backwards and it's 2053, but either way, red realistically speaking, this is when my granddaughters are in their 30s, are looking at having a world controlled by robots
Mm-hmm.
that
That look like humans.
look like humans and can read and adapt to us in ways that this article just, it could be really scary to people who, I mean, I look at it and I'm like, this is not a good thing.
Yeah.
And this is a person who is, it came from the guy, one of the people who helped develop the system, and he's going, warning, warning. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking Terminator all over again. And I'm like, they
Mm-hmm.
warned us in these movies in the 80s of this coming our direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Bill Gates has been working on AI for the brains and the brains. I call it, see, I refer to it as brains, but the robots that they were making in Japan so that they could actually stay upright
Mm-hmm.
and have equilibrium.
Yeah.
Like this is
It's
I
wild.
kept saying this is not good
Mm-hmm.
because there's going to be a whole lot of us that don't understand how to work with that. And of course,
Yeah.
I'm me and my little scientific mind is like, they're probably already ahead of me. And I'm thinking EMP, there's always one way to deal with this. A big
Mm-hmm.
solar flare is going to make them stop dead in their tracks. But if
Yeah.
you're in control of everything, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. I met a woman a few years ago who studies and leads the evolution of the ethics of AI development. Like I met her at a conference and she was talking about it. This might seem unrelated, but it all comes back to the idea of programming, right? As humans, how we are programmed and taught.
yep.
And that is what's determining coding. So people might think electronics are coded, and code is neutral, code is code. But right, if a robot can read facial expressions, if a robot is able to make decisions through these different algorithms that are coded into them, what are the ethics? What are the morals of the human that created the coding system? That's a whole different level of, holy cow, who's controlling that? Who's training the coders of
That's
the
interesting
AI?
that
Who's
you brought
designing
that up.
this stuff?
That is so cool, because that's one of the things that he brought up. He's like,
Yeah.
they can go through a series of simulated emotions,
Mhm.
but they don't have that moral judgment. There's still
Yes.
that free will, the spirit, the divine God, Gaia, goddesses, gods, the universe, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
There's still that exists in us that separates us from them. And oh my goodness. So that was funny, because that was one of the things.
Mm.
And you're right. This is all part of how we program each other through conditioning.
The human experience.
It may look different, sound different, but it's the same thing. Like the book, that excerpt I read out of the book, well, if a woman speaks up, then she's just proven that she doesn't deserve the needs and the what?
Mhm.
What? So we're looked at like those robots
Yes.
in many ways.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to circle back around to, this isn't a man or boy bashing
Right.
scenario in any way, shape, or form. This isn't what we're talking about. But we are talking about the strength and empowerment and autonomy of women that deserves its equal place.
Mhm.
We are half of the population, give or take.
More.
Worldwide, it says
Yeah.
we're 49.3, and that there's 4 more men to each 500 women. But, I mean, we're splitting hairs when we get to that. We're half and half.
Mhm.
And one half is saying this half doesn't have the right to be autonomous,
Mhm.
just because of the conditioning they've been through.
Yes.
And I just wanted to revisit what I had said about, my oldest son, and allowing him to play with a gender neutral Cabbage Patch doll when he was a baby, and developing his little people skills, and how that played out. He's got a lot of compassion for children. Children love to be around him. He learned how to nurture something, even if it was pretend, but that's what they do in kindergarten classes.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, they ascribe gender roles, which that's where I feel like the gap is. If we teach people how to be nurturing, it doesn't mean that you can't have your masculine self. It doesn't mean you can't have your feminine self. Those are energies. It has nothing to do with the outward part of your body. It's what's inside of you. I
Yeah.
wanted to play with truck. I didn't like dolls. I played with trucks. I played with Hot Wheels. I played with the mud. I dug holes. I tried to dig to China. I mean, my cousin and I dug a hole in the backyard. They were not happy with us. It was about 6 feet deep, and they're like, we don't own this house. What are you doing? We're trying to get to China. You can't do that. But, thank you, Warner Brothers, for encouraging us to do so, just stuff like that. But,
Yes.
you know, either way, I still like being a woman. I still like the role that I get to play in that. But I didn't feel like I should be defined by what I enjoy doing. I played
Mhm.
sports. I was a very big sports person. I did motorcycle racing. I did football. I was the only girl on a football team. Baseball. I played boys baseball. I was always more, even as an adult, when I took Taekwondo. I was in Ernie Reyes West Coast Taekwondo in the Bay Area in Sunnyvale. And I was in their black belt program, and they came to me and said, we need you to bow out were willing to give you your money back. And I'm like, why? And they said, because the other women said you were too intimidating.
Yeah.
I was like, what? And they said, you're too intimidating. I was like, so if I'm in the back alley and some guy's trying to rape me, what am I supposed to say? I'm a woman. So forgive me if I use my Taekwondo on you. This just, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. So I asked, because in their traditional style, the men and women are separated. And they did have family classes, but only up to certain points. And then they had the traditional sectioning of men and women. And I said, well, can I join the men's group? And they said, well, we're going to have to ask. And I was allowed to come in, and these men chose to make it known that if I was going to be there, I was going to play the way that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And I had bruises from my waist up where they were constantly kicking me. They're not supposed to kick you above the waist, above the belt, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But they were, for a better terminology, initiating me, hazing me, whatever you want to. Okay, well, if you're going to play with the men, then you've got to be able to hang with us.
Yeah.
Well, I did. And I dropped a couple of them.
That's right.
I said, this goes both ways. And yes, I'll be here, but no, you're not leaving any more bruises on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can leave some on you. Only you won't like, I'm shorter than you, so you won't like the ratio here, but and then I went into the space of becoming an assistant instructor. And I was teaching a gentleman one night how to spar. So we're putting on the gear. I'm showing him how to put on all the gear and the headgear. And this is relevant to, women stepping into powerful roles. And how sometimes we are different, but at the same time, don't underestimate what's in the little package or what's in that little package. And I thought,
Air quotes.
yeah, air quotes, I thought I had held back. And I said, so when you throw the first punch, you do it this way. And I demonstrated into his chest gear, into the pad. And I was convinced I was just literally going tap. And the next thing I know, he's flying across the studio and lands into the mirror. And the other instructor looks at me and goes, oh, what did you just do? I'm like, that's a good question. What did I just do?
I owned my power.
And boy, did I own my power.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that, but see, then I was immediately seen as, again, too aggressive, and that's not how women are supposed to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always told, hold back. Again, later in Aikido, in my 40s, I had black belts that were going, hey, you need to hold back. I'm like, okay, if I hold back anymore, I should just go sit down and watch, because I don't understand this concept of hold back. And they had a sensei come out from Japan who was like, you've got some power and you do need to learn how to hold back in this format, because this is a learning environment. Now, if you were in Japan, there would be some people that could show you up, but you're pretty strong, and I'm just like, oh, okay. It was just that I'm very focused, which kind of goes into another aspect of what we do, is helping people focus.
Yeah.
And how that focus can really be intense when it's really got the energy behind it, because that's what that is. In Japanese, it's called ki, and it's energy. And I even have my little framed Japanese letter word for ki, because it's something that I need physically energy. I have a lot of medical conditions, but yet here it shows up when the focus is there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you and I both, when we're helping people, because I wanted to get into that space of what we do,
Yeah.
where we do end our day together. I do transformational art and life coaching together
Mm-hmm.
to work through spaces where people are experiencing negative triggers and traumas that are holding them back, that are, causing them relationship issues and focus issues and health issues, because stress, and that's a personal experience. I had a heart attack at 29. I died 5 years ago. As a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, 5 years. And I've had lifelong health problems that have been complicated by that
Yeah.
stress. And it got less and less complicated. Well, it's a residual thing when your health starts to go downhill. So if I can help somebody not get to that space in the first place, or at least thwart it early on, then they can, hopefully avoid those pitfalls that come with once you've done the damage. Then, you can even reverse it, because we have that power. Again, the focus of our energy. I'm in the middle of, I'm almost done with level 1 Reiki, and learning that energy and how I'm opening my heart space, and it's helping, even though I need a heart procedure, but I can work the two together to improve my overall heart health. I'm learning heart math from Seamus
Yes.
Power, and just all of these different things that can help us. And I know for me, when I help people move out of that space of being stuck, and they didn't even realize, maybe it's stuff they've worked through, or maybe it's just something that's temporary. For one person, it was, people that they're dealing with at work that are triggering them. Well, there's a reason why they're triggering you. Let's take a look at it, and let's move through it through my methodology. And, and I also like to empower women and little girls, and that's where you come in. And we have this nice intersection of what we do. And I'd love for you to share a little more about that too. A lot
Yeah. As you're saying the word stuck, I'm starting to think more and more about how to explain that feeling. Because I think so many people get stuck. That's exactly what you and I are doing, is how do you get unstuck when you are stuck? But what the heck does that feel like?
Yes.
And I think when I work with girls and women, the feeling comes out in two different ways. One kind of stuckness is as if your feet are stuck. My husband used to say, like, are you stuck in a puddle of emotions? With
Mm,
all loving kindness. And I'd say, I am right now. My feet are stuck, but my head is spinning. My heart is heavy and black. And right. So there's the element of feeling like you literally can't move, yet you might feel out of control and spinning. Then there's the other form of stuck where there's just blank.
yeah.
You're asked a question, you can't think of a response. You sit down to write, nothing comes out. You want to be creative, there's no creativity. And taking that back to the idea of chi, ki, kundalini, energy, heart love,
Yes.
whatever your cultural background is,
Mhm.
this idea of autonomy and focus and heart centeredness is what it all comes back to.
Yeah.
And for me, a lot of this is about justice, which is another intersection for both of us.
Yes.
So when I work with women and girls, there's this element of vulnerable justice where you've experienced wrongdoings. We all have. How do you own your voice to express what the needs are, to overcome the wounds? And then through that expression, that's where we start to get into justice, because it can't always be such a harsh battle. And if something was imposed on us, let's impose something back on the wrongdoer. Like that does, to me, that's not justice, right? You have to make it right. You don't just do bad things back and forth.
Nope.
And that's part of the stuckness, is we don't know another way because of the programming.
Yeah.
So we do what was done to us.
it's sometimes figuratively and sometimes literally.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
I agree. Oh boy, do I agree with that. It is. And another way I feel when I know that I'm experiencing stuff,
Mm,
because we've both done a lot of our own inner work. So I'm
yeah.
light years ahead of where I was even 2 years ago. But I know when I'm having those moments, for me, it shows up when my body feels like it's being sucked to the earth.
Yes.
Like the magnetic pull has me just difficult to move.
Hmm.
It's like, uh, you know, like you could just picture Iron Man trying to move along a magnetic field, you know,
Yes.
it's just, it's so difficult to move forward. And that's a physical feeling for a metaphorical thing that's going on inside the head. It's the
Precisely.
stories that are in there that want attention
Hmm.
and need a way to be directed. And thankfully, you know, I have a way to do that. And I now understand what that looks like when it's showing up. And it's like, okay, sit with myself. What is it that I'm feeling? What is it that's bothering me? Is it what I just read? Is it what I just saw? Yesterday, I had some pretty heavy moments, one of which was a young boy that they showed a video. It was a lady that, a Ukrainian doctor or nurse, field nurse, that has now been captured by Russia. But she had had used a head cam to record her moments of saving people's lives. And it's another long story, but long story short, she got that little chip, you know, the little sand disk out to the public. And I watched a video of a little boy die on the table, and you see her camera turn and she bumps her head against the wall because she leans into it and she starts sobbing. That was heavy,
Hmm.
you know, and we have to step back sometimes because we don't always know where the trigger came from. And just sitting with ourselves. And I think the meditation is really important for it. Is something that I'm incorporating into what I do.
Hmm.
I try to do that before I get into doing different exercises with my free writing, because it allows to just get into that, like
It's the
before you go
focus.
swimming, you, if you
Yeah.
take a shower before you swim, your body kind of sets itself
Yes.
before you hit that water. And it's not a reset, but it's a preset. So you set
Yes. That's a
yourself into a nice neutral space to be able to explore what's really at the core of that feeling heavy,
mhm.
or in the mud puddle, or you know,
Yeah.
just what what is this, you know? And yes, it is, justice is not tit for tat. That is not justice.
Hmm.
And I often bring that up to people, even with the, you know, being raped and the things that I've been through. It's like, I still believe in due process.
Mm.
Everybody has the right to be defended and have the facts looked at. And what is it that caused that person to hurt you? Was it just blatant evil? Was I, you know, I mean, physiologically, there are some people who their wiring just wasn't correct, and their physiological makeup just didn't allow them to become that good, positive energy.
Mhm.
Whatever they chose, that unfortunately was the path that that soul went on. I do believe that they exist. I just believe that they're very few, very few.
Yes.
And I believe that, you know, in that hurt, people hurt. So when I learned how to see people through the lens of innocence, which I think is critical to what we both do,
Hmm.
you know, because in order to heal as women, we do have to be able to see the hurt that men go through to be men, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
And, you know, I mean, there's so many stresses on both sides.
Mhm.
And in order to gain what we do, you know, what we see as equality, autonomy, the equalness of being a human, we do have to understand the being and autonomy of the other side.
Mhm. And that's what creates the harmony and balance.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am
Wow.
enjoying this conversation thoroughly, and I know we're coming up on
Yeah.
on
Yes.
our time, but I definitely would love to do more of this, and maybe we could even have more voices
Mhm.
included in our conversations so that we can get some more perspectives, you know, just to hear maybe women and men,
Yes.
maybe, you know, maybe start with just women and then incorporate men in, or just go ahead and invite everybody into that space, as long as everybody can hold that neutral space together
Yeah.
and be open. We could learn a lot.
That's right. I'm just thinking like as my closing here, I'm just gonna say watch out world because Catana and Samantha are gonna partner up here
Yep, here we
on
go.
something.
But we did talk about the children's books for girls too, the empowering books for girls.
Yes.
We could even incorporate caring books for young boys that
Hmm.
begin to see differently
Yeah.
the world around them.
Powerful kindness, powerful caring.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
You, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
very much needed.
Hmm. I love it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transformational Art with Catana. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like button and share the link to this podcast with your family and friends. To connect with me personally, please send an email to transformationalartwithkatana@gmail.com. Have a beautiful day.